Hello everyone, welcome back to Loose Goose Gaming. This is your host, Lapis-Lazuli, and today I'm going to be starting a new retrospective for the Ace Attorney series made by Capcom. This series actually goes back quite a bit. The original game, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, was originally released in Japan in the year 2001, and on the Game Boy Advance, mind you. But it did not make its way over to other countries until 2005 with the Nintendo DS release of the original game, which was again called Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, but there was an extra episode of sorts added in for a little extra content, and it took advantage of the Nintendo DS's unique capabilities. For this retrospective, it's going to be split into multiple chapters, episodes, I guess you could say. And for this first one, we're going to be starting off with the Ace Attorney trilogy. But I'm only going to be focusing on the first game and the second game. For this episode, I will be covering Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney and Phoenix Wright Justice for All, or maybe it's called Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Justice for All. That is a mouthful though. Just to save time, I'm just going to refer to the games by their subtitles, because if you're watching the Ace Attorney retrospective, you most likely already know where I'm getting at just by saying the subtitles. So, for a little bit of background, I was introduced to the series, funnily enough, I found Trials and Tribulations randomly in a Walmart. I think it was around the year 2009. I randomly saw the game in a completely unrelated aisle, I seem to recall. Like, it wasn't in the gaming aisle, I think it actually was in the bedsheet aisle, somehow, funnily enough. Or maybe I put it there to hide it, I don't remember, but it was on clearance for $15. And I saw the cover, and I'm like, oh, I've heard about Ace Attorney before. I've always been kind of curious to try the game out. And little to my knowledge, I wasn't aware that it was actually the third game in the series, and actually the final entry of a trilogy. Well, I didn't know any better, you know. I just figured, I'll just play this because it's on clearance for $15, you know. Discovering Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney was definitely a high point in that period of my life. And yeah, I started off with the third game in the series. And I actually would go on to track down the other two games, Justice for All and the original Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. It was definitely worth it in the long run. So, I played through the trilogy in reverse order, and that hasn't really affected my opinion in the way you think it would. And as I go through this retrospective, I think people will come to see my logic behind all that. Yeah, so that's my background of how I was introduced to the series. And, well, I played through the trilogy in reverse order, and then, ever since then, every time I replay the series, I always replay it in chronological order. For this episode, though, that pretty much covers my personal background with the series. And now we're going to move on to talking about the first game and the first case, which is called The First Turnabout. Alright, so we're going to start by talking about the very first episode of not just the first game, but the entire series, really. I'm going to go ahead and say this now. I've neglected to mention this intentionally. I will be kind of spoiling this first episode, but honestly, you watch the intro and the killer is already spoiled for you, so I don't think people that might be watching this that maybe never played the games before, if you're listening to this now, I don't think you're gonna, be offended that I'm gonna talk about something that the game itself spoils, This will be the only exception, though, and I'm going to take advantage of this to talk about the games as much as I can without spoiling, so that it's more accessible for people to watch. Just going to let you all know ahead of time, starting with the next case and onward, I will be talking about spoilers. But since this is the first turnabout, it's the shortest case in the series by a huge margin. And there's really not much to it. Like I said, the killer is spoiled in the intro. The name of the killer being Frank Saw It. Because, he saw it. And I'm going by the English localization names for all these characters, obviously, since I'm American. I speak English. I couldn't tell you the Japanese names of all these characters off the top of my head. I think Phoenix's Japanese name is Naruhodo or something like that. That's neither here nor there. But continuing on, the first turnabout introduces us to Phoenix Wright himself, as well as Larry Butts, Mia Fey, and the Judge. These are all important characters that don't just show up the one time and then never show up again. And as for Frank Saw It, well, he gets the honor of being the first murderer in the series, but he doesn't really show back up again. He's not really relevant, except for a bit part in one of the Ace Attorney side games, and I'm not going to say much more than that. But the first turnabout, it really just, it's a simple case, as simple does. Mia Fey is there to guide Phoenix on his very first case, because he's taking it to defend his friend Larry. And, Larry is one of those people, one of those characters that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to, and a lot of people can relate to knowing people like Larry Butts. Oh, man. People that may or may not intentionally be a problem in your life, but they still somehow are a problem. But they're actually a really, really good person, and you kind of overlook it for the most part. I know someone like that in my personal life, so I definitely see a lot of that person in Larry, and I'm sure a lot of people can see that kind of person in Larry. And honestly, I think Larry is a pretty good character. And, it's not like he's not grateful, as we'll see in a later case, or more. He's actually pretty grateful to Phoenix for what he did. And we will see the fruits of this, but just not anytime soon. So, yeah, I mean, the first turnabout is 30 minutes long if you're going at a pretty brisk pace, if you know what you're doing. Even if you don't know what you're doing, you're stumbling somehow on all of the testimonies and everything. At worst, maybe it'll be 45 minutes. I don't think I've ever seen anybody take longer than that to clear the first turnabout, even if they've never even heard of the game before or anything like that. It's just easy come, easy go. The first turnabout, if it was released as a demo, it would suffice as a demo for the first game as well as the entire trilogy. But I mean, that's all there is to the first turnabout. Like I said, it's Phoenix Wright's first case. He defends his friend Larry Butts. He's accused of murdering a girlfriend. The girlfriend dies because of Frank Saw It. He's a little thief. He's a little pesky thief, he is. So, yeah. And, it's nice to see Mia Fey because, well, we'll see what happens in the next case. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the first turnabout. We're going to take a little break here, and then see you for the little retrospective on the next case. spoiler territory from here on out. If you don't want to be spoiled on the games at all, I'm not going to be offended if you decide to click off, go play the games, and then come back to this to listen to my thoughts on the rest of the games, but every single thing from here on out is spoiler territory. I don't want to risk it. I don't want to spoil you. So, case number 2, Turnabout Sisters. This starts off intense, but again, it also kind of gives away the murder. There's a lot more to it than what happened with the first Turnabout and Frank saw it. We start off, we get introduced to Maya Fey, Mia Fey's little sister, as well as Dick Gumshoe, the detective. A fan-favorite character to be sure, and I can definitely see why. Yeah, Dick Gumshoe's a pretty cool character. He's a kind of an aloof detective. You don't really see too much of that in his first appearance, I find. I find that his aloofness becomes more prominent the deeper you go into the story of the Ace Attorney trilogy, specifically. The first time, you know, it might have been intentional, but they do try to play him off as a pretty serious guy for the most part. But you'll find that starting with the very next case and onward, you kind of start to see more of the true Dick Gumshoe, as it were. There will be plenty of times to talk about him again, though, as his character develops throughout the trilogy. Oh yeah, did I mention this is more of a visual novel or virtual novel than a video game? Because, and 90% of the gameplay in the Ace Attorney series is sifting through dialogue. And you're probably used to going through a lot of dialogue in like an RPG or something, but this ain't an RPG, Chief. The actual gameplay is kind of a glorified point-and-click adventure, if I'm going to be honest. And fun fact, I actually played quite a few of those on PC back in the day. And by back in the day, I mean the 90s when I was a little kid. Yeah, I remember playing point-and-click adventure games like Spy Fox. And yeah, that was one thing that surprised me. I wasn't expecting that from the Ace Attorney series when I got into it. What little gameplay there is, it's a point-and-click adventure. There's just a lot more emphasis on dialogue and story than PC point-and-click adventures, I feel. If you're used to point-and-click adventure games, you should easily transition to Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, I feel. So, yeah. At any rate, we'll just continue on here. Maya Fey, though, again, you can kind of see the personality at first, but because of the circumstances of her being accused of murdering her own sister, you're going to have to deal with her as a defendant in the same vein as Larry Butts from the first Turnabout, for at least the first half, or a little bit more than the first half, really. So that's basically going to be the whole plot of the first half of Turnabout Sisters. Maya Fey is accused of murdering her sister. The player knows this because of the intro, that it was clearly not Maya Fey that murdered Mia Fey. So that's basically the summation of the first investigation chapter. By the way, a lot of these cases have chapters, and you wouldn't know that because the first Turnabout is a single trial chapter. However, starting with Turnabout Sisters, there's a difference in format where you're going to start with an investigation segment. This is where the point-and-click adventure isms really start to show themselves. Because the investigation segments have a little more involved gameplay, since you're actually having to click to go to various locations. And you actually have to click on still pictures to find evidence and whatnot that you can use in the trial chapters. So usually the flow of a traditional Phoenix Wright case is that you'll go from investigation to trial to investigation to trial. Sometimes the individual investigations and trials will be split up into multiple smaller chapters. Turnabout Sisters is 2 investigation chapters and 2 trial chapters. So that's the first investigation chapter of Turnabout Sisters. You go to the trial, and this is when we're introduced to one of the biggest fan favorite characters in the series. I can certainly see why, but I still find the feverish attention the character gets is kind of hilarious. Miles Edgeworth, the prosecutor. We don't learn very much about him in Turnabout Sisters, so I'm not going to talk about it much, but he is a prosecutor, and he's very good at his job. He hasn't lost a case, supposedly. And there are also rumors that he forges evidence to get his victories. Oh boy! Whoa, we are in some hot water here, aren't we? Except we know... the player knows who the murderer is. And Phoenix Wright strongly believes in his clients, always. Even to a fault. We'll see this later on. But he believes in his client's innocence. Every single time, without fail. Oh boy, Phoenix has to go up against Edgeworth in court. And it's just like, oh man. The back and forth that these two go through is just a sight to behold. You don't really see too much of that in Turnabout Sisters because of Edgeworth's mentality for this case. He's still in the mindset of wanting to get his guilty verdict through any means necessary, including some shenanigans with an autopsy report, a late autopsy report, which is technically not false evidence, but it is kind of a dick move. Kind of a dick gumshoe move, you might argue. At any rate, first trial, you learn about a witness named April May, and, well, they're worth looking into because during the investigation, you stumble upon a wiretap. The only reason you even know there's a wiretap in that drawer is because there's a screwdriver sticking out, and you're like, what is this woman doing with a screwdriver sticking out of her drawer? And, I don't know if that was intentional. Yeah, because of the little shenanigans with the screwdriver, you find a wiretap in the drawer, and if it wasn't for that, you wouldn't really have a basis to summon the witness, or even to be able to assume that the witness could be a suspect in Mia Fey's murder. I mean, the player knows who murdered Mia Fey, so going through all this is a little silly, but it's a necessary evil. And the cross-examination of April May is hilarious, you know. That's the thing about dealing with witnesses in the trial segments. They usually have very delicious breakdowns once you've satisfactorily proven their guilt, or their perjury, or what other crime they may or may not be committing. And that is one of the satisfactions of the Ace Attorney series, I thought. Especially if you find out on your own for the first time playing these games. I don't recommend using a step-by-step guide, by the way, for playing through the games for the first time. My first time playing the games, I would save scum. What is save scumming, you might ask? Well, save scumming is basically the process of making a save file and resetting it until you get a satisfactory result. But nowadays, whenever I replay the series, I do use a step-by-step guide because, you know, I've already been through it all once, and I don't want to go through the save scumming process again. And, you know, replaying the games, it's a lot like rereading a nice book. A favorite book you may or may not have, you know? So it's a lot, that's a good way of looking at the Ace Attorney games. They're books. They're just in a much more interesting format for people like me that would rather, look at some nice animations and pictures to go along with the huge amounts of dialogue. And there's still room for imagination, too, believe it or not. But anyway, first trial chapter, you deal with April May. You also deal with Gumshoe. Gumshoe is the detective, so usually he will be the first witness to kind of set the bare facts of the case. There are exceptions to this where he doesn't do this, funnily enough, but for the most part, if Gumshoe is involved in a case, you can expect him to be the first witness you're gonna deal with. You find out about April May, her involvement in the murder, that she installed a wiretap, so that makes her very suspicious. And during the next investigation chapter, you find out who she works for. And she works for someone named Red White, who works at Blue Corp, I think it was? Yeah, Blue Corp. Yeah, I kind of stumbled a bit there, because there's actually a name of another place in a later Ace Attorney game that has blue in it as well. That was kind of throwing me off a little bit. Thought maybe it was a reference. Anyway, Blue Corp is apparently a company that deals in extracting information. Definitely not dubious at all. But basically, the whole point of the second investigation chapter of Turnabout Sisters is basically, you know, you find out about Red White and you gotta prove that he's guilty. He's the one that killed Mia Fey because he's very suspicious. I mean, the player knows this, alright? The player knows this, but Phoenix doesn't. And you gotta, you know, guide him along the way somehow. It's actually kind of funny how it all plays out. But as you're doing this, Red White kind of has connections, and he kind of twists things around to where now all of a sudden Phoenix is the suspect for Mia Fey's murder. What? And then Maya Fey is cleared of suspicions at the 7th hour. Wow. So, towards the tail end of the investigation chapter, Maya is free, and she is now officially Phoenix's partner in crime. Wow, that's kind of a weird thing to say for a lawyer, but yeah, that's how things go starting from here on out. Maya is Phoenix's partner. Well, it isn't official yet in the narrative of the game, but let's continue on to the final trial chapter of Turnabout Sisters, where everything comes to a head. You're basically only dealing with Red White. You're proving his guilt. I'm going to kind of summarize a little bit. But you find out Maya is able to channel the spirits of the dead. And guess who just recently died and has quite the motive to see Red White be found guilty, as well as Phoenix Wright being declared innocent. That's right, Mia Fey. Because, oh boy, you want to talk about Deus Ex Machina? I want to talk about Deus Ex Mia Fey. Because, yeah, that's usually what happens anytime you see Mia Fey show up. You know, channeled by a spirit medium. She's usually there to save Phoenix's ass. It's every single time without fail. Which, it's understandable because Phoenix is still a new lawyer and because there's a lot of stakes in this case. So, it's totally understandable to see Mia Fey jump to Phoenix's side to help him out because, you know, it's a mutually beneficial arrangement because you want to see Red White get taken down. So, Mia Fey comes to the rescue, save the day, and it's satisfying, it really is. But you technically don't take down Red White yourself as Phoenix Wright. Technically, it is Mia's victory, but it's fitting that it would end that way. So, you know, I'm fine with this ending for Turnabout Sisters. I don't know if everybody is satisfied with this, but I personally think it's a pretty good ending to everything. I also kind of consider the first Turnabout and Turnabout Sisters to be part of a larger case. Like, first Turnabout is part 1 and Turnabout Sisters is part 2. Officially, they're separate cases, but there is an argument to be made that they could be lumped in together. Like, there's one piece of evidence, actually, from the first Turnabout. The Thinker Clock, which was the murder weapon that Frank used to kill the victim of that case. It becomes an important piece of evidence in Turnabout Sisters. And actually, when I think about it, I believe it too was the murder weapon once again. I could be wrong, I'm going off memory here, but yeah, I think it wound up being the murder weapon twice. Kind of crazy to think about. Yeah, you know, Phoenix defeats Edgeworth with the help of Mia, and doesn't really affect Edgeworth very much that he lost. We're not going to see the repercussions of this until... So, we're going to go ahead and take another little break here before we move on to Case 3, Turnabout Samurai. Holy Samurai Warrior! I couldn't resist the opportunity to do an Aku impression from Samurai Jack. Because the third case is called Turnabout Samurai. This is one of my favorite cases in the series. And apparently that's not a very popular opinion, and I am surprised about this. I'm also surprised to see a lot of people online try to argue that this is a filler case? Are you serious? Because this is the first real case of the series, in my honest opinion, because this is the first case where Maya is fully involved as Phoenix's partner. This is also the first case where, like, everything is fully and properly established, because, you know, the Turnabout Sister situation, that was kind of a mess. I mean, Turnabout Samurai is the first case where it feels like it's a standard case. There's no real strings attached, you know? And lengthwise, it's a little bit longer than the first two cases combined. So yeah, you definitely get your fill of Ace Attorney goodness here. And there's a lot to like about this case. And I can't really think of anything that's bad about it. I mean, people don't like this case? Really? I'm not gonna try and sit here and say, oh, it's one of the best cases in the series. Oh my, no, this is still mid-tier at best. But to argue that this case is filler, unimportant, not interesting, no. Turnabout Samurai is a good case. So let's get into why it's a good case. Why don't we? Turnabout Samurai, like I said, it's the first real case where Phoenix is, you know, he's a defense attorney, you know, he's already had a couple cases under his belt, so he's not a complete and total greenhorn, and Maya's his partner, and he gets his first real client, because, like, the first client, it was his best friend, childhood friend, you know, Larry Butts, and it was only the trial chapter. You didn't get to go through the investigation period of that. And Turnabout Sisters, you know, you had Maya, and then you had to defend yourself. Phoenix had to defend himself, rather. And the first client, officially, without it being, like, strings attached, is Will Powers, who's a pretty nice guy, all things considered. He's kind of relatable, too, in a way, because, like, he's an actor, right? He plays a character called the Steel Samurai. Oh, by the way, Steel Samurai's theme song, that's a real banger. Look up some remixes on YouTube. Seriously, oh, and that's another thing worth talking about, actually. The music of the Ace Attorney series is unusually good for the genre that these games fit into. Anyway, yeah, Will Powers plays the Steel Samurai, but he plays the character in a full bodysuit covering his face, because he feels that the Steel Samurai is a children's show, and he doesn't want his face to be depicted because he fears that he'll scare the children or ruin their memories of the Steel Samurai. He really cares about the children, and he feels like he's ugly. I'm sure there are people that can relate to that, or you might feel like you're physically unattractive, but surely you have a personality of gold, and appearances don't matter, you know? They really don't, and if people care about appearances, well, they're shallow and fickle, and their opinions are not worth even thinking about. When you're talking about making a show as appealing as possible, and, you know, there's no problem doing a full bodysuit. A little off topic. Anyway, Will Powers is the first real client that you deal with. And, you know, he's accused of murdering a co-worker of his. Oh boy. When you find out the truth about that, though, oh jeez. So let's just continue on. And, oh man, Dick Gumshoe is the investigator once again. Since this case is a lot more lighthearted than the previous one, you see a little bit more of Gumshoe's aloofness here, for sure. Still nothing really major right now, other than the fact he thinks Phoenix is Larry and calls him Harry Butts instead of Larry Butts. Oh boy. Wouldn't it be funny if he actually called Larry Harry? That would be kind of funny, wouldn't it? But yeah, Gumshoe is back. More of the same of how he was in Turnabout Sisters. Just a little bit more aloof. I guess his guard isn't as high up, you could say. And again, Maya's your partner, but Maya's a charming enough character. You know, she has the cute factor working for her, so a lot of people are into that sort of thing. I'm personally indifferent to Maya. I think she's a fine character and everything, but perhaps a little bit overrated, just a little bit. Like, I don't think her not being in a game makes the game inferior. She does have a good character arc to go through in the trilogy, and when she does come back a few times afterwards, it's nice, you know. It's also hilarious how, more often than not, she's usually accused of being the murderer. That definitely doesn't get old the third or fourth time. But, you know, and her being able to channel the spirits of the dead, that's nice. Anyways, since it's 3 investigations and 3 trials, there's a lot to go through. A lot more to go through with Turnabout Samurai than Sister. So, the first investigation chapter, you focus on, you know, trying to figure out who killed Jack Hammer. You're looking into who murdered Jack Hammer, because obviously it wasn't Will Powers. I mean, if you talk to the guy, you get the feeling he couldn't murder a fly. You know, he's one of those kinds of people. You know, unless you go by appearances, which again you shouldn't. But you come across the fact that there was a security guard working at the studio where they were filming the Steel Samurai, and yeah, the security guard, her name's Wendy Oldbag. You might want to keep that name in mind, because this isn't the last time you're going to be dealing with her. Not just in the main series, but she also shows up in one of the side series, and she may or may not be a little overused there, but yeah, let's keep going with this. Keep going with this and see where it goes. I find that in this appearance of Old Bag, she's not too bad. She's pretty tolerable, honestly, because this is her most straightforward appearance. She goes on, she rambles a lot because she's an old lady. A lot of old people do tend to ramble on. I was raised by my grandparents, so I relate to this surprisingly well. You know, sometimes old people will just sit there and they'll just ramble on about the most insignificant things. And you'll notice this with Old Bag throughout the first 2 investigation segments, I think a little bit of the 3rd one too, of this case. But she's like the only other person you can reasonably throw suspicion towards, so for the sake of moving the case forward, Phoenix goes ahead with accusing her of being a suspect, the murder of Jack Hammer, even though she's like Jack Hammer's biggest fan of her. Yeah, I accidentally summed up the first trial chapter right there. That's basically all it is. Gumshoe shows up to give the bare facts of the case, and then Wendy shows up right after that to give everyone a taste of the Old Bag, and in return, Phoenix accuses her of murdering Jack Hammer. But if it wasn't for that, the case probably would have been closed right there, and we can't have that. Things get a little more interesting with the second investigation chapter. You get introduced to a kid character, the first child character that you really deal with in the series, and I think it's really interesting how they portray Cody Hackins, honestly, because they don't depict him as all that immature, which is something that a lot of shows, a lot of media tend to do with child characters. They usually depict them as what people think of children. They're all immature, whiny brats. But Cody doesn't really act like that too much. I mean, you can definitely tell he's a child in some of the ways he acts, but for the most part, he's actually quite the intimidating person to deal with, in a way. Kind of surprising you deal with him in court, but you also have to deal with this director guy who is, not gonna lie, they kind of paint him as a bit of a creeper, but possibly not in the bad kind of way, just the kind of way where he's a creeper, but he's not a creeper in the bad way. He's just a very eccentric personality. And that person is Salmonella, right, by the way. Yes, they localize his name as Salmonella. Why, Capcom USA? Why? But basically, that's the second investigation. You find out about Salmonella. You also find out about D. Vasquez, but it's not really a huge focus on D. Vasquez right now. You deal with Salmonella and Cody Hackins in the trial. And, you don't really get a lot of information from Sal. But Cody, oh man, you get quite the revelation. Cody is a big fan of the Steel Samurai, and I'm sure a lot of people can remember when they were a kid, maybe they were really into something like Power Rangers, and they could probably relate on that level, So you probably noticed I brought up a lot of times, there are a lot of relatable characters in this first Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. And I think that's one reason why this first game is so well beloved. But anyway, Cody Hackins is a big fan of the Steel Samurai. He carries around a camera and takes a picture of all the times where the Steel Samurai wins. And apparently, he saw the Steel Samurai at the studio. which is definitely interesting. Because, you know, Will Powers, he's the actor behind Steel Samurai, so it definitely raises eyebrows, and that's fair. But, yeah, it kind of goes into the testimony a little bit. Then you find out he never took a picture of when he saw the Steel Samurai at the studio. Well, that's interesting. If Cody Hackins is a big fan of the Steel Samurai, and he always takes a picture whenever the Steel Samurai would win, but he didn't take a picture, what does that... Oh, the Steel Samurai lost. But wait, if the Steel Samurai lost, and this isn't a show, does that mean the Steel Samurai was actually murdered? And then it all clicks. I don't think that's actually how the flow of logic goes in the game, but you know, just go with it here. This is a retrospective, it's not a review or a let's play. God forbid if I did a let's play of Ace Attorney games, yeah, that would drag. Anyway, yeah, you find out the Steel Samurai was murdered. And it turns out, you know, it obviously wasn't Will Powers. Turns out Jack Hammer was wearing the Steel Samurai suit. Wonder why he did that. Yeah, pretty sure it's established at this point he did it because he doesn't want suspicion to be cast upon him. He would rather be cast on Will Powers. Anybody but him. And unfortunately, he still wound up being murdered. But who murdered him, you might wonder. And this is where it gets good. Really good. Not really the investigation, because that's actually over with in less than half an hour, because all it is basically you talking to Dee Vasquez to find out more information from her. I mean, by that point, you've basically investigated just about everything else, so, you know, pretty much a formality. But we get to the trial. It's pretty much Phoenix and Edgeworth versus Dee Vasquez. Oh, you might be thinking, wait. Edgeworth versus? That's right. This is the turning point for Edgeworth's character. And this is where it gets good with Edgeworth. And this is probably the case that made it, well, some people may not want to admit it, but this is probably the case that made a lot of people a fan of Edgeworth. I mean, come on. This is him at maybe not his best. I think his best is yet to come in this retrospective, but Turnabout Samurai, it's up there. Definitely up there. Shame about what happens after this, but yeah, the confrontation between Phoenix and Edgeworth versus Vasquez is a sight to behold, honestly. And it's still one of my favorite moments in the series, where Edgeworth finally comes to terms with the fact that, you know, maybe there's more to being a prosecutor than always shooting for the guilty verdict, huh? No, this is the part where you find out the only thing that matters is the truth. Oh man, when you find out that Vasquez didn't actually intentionally kill Jack Hammer, it was actually self-defense. That's a nice curveball. What can I say? And yeah, that's Turnabout Samurai. I'm sorry it took like almost 18 minutes to sum it all up, but yeah, this is a great case. And people want to try and argue this is filler? If you go from Turnabout Sisters, you skip this somehow, and you go to the next case, it's not going to make as much sense. You need to go through this case to understand more of Edgeworth's arc as it really starts to develop more in the next case. So, why don't we move on to talking about that next case? Case 4, Turnabout Goodbyes. But before we move on to that, why don't we take another brief intermission? Edgeworth murdered a guy, hmm? Yeah, I find that hard to believe. So, I like Turnabout Samurai. I really do. But Turnabout Goodbyes is the best case in Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. Objectively speaking, and there is... Oh man, I wouldn't be surprised if I go for 20 minutes talking about how good this case is. You thought Turnabout Samurai was decent. It starts off a little slow. Yeah, find out Edgeworth might have murdered a guy. No, obviously he didn't. At least it doesn't give away who committed the murder. So hey, you get a little surprise factor there. But it starts off just like the other two cases. You know, you run into Gumshoe. But this time, Gumshoe has a little bit... His motives are a little bit different this time around, because it turns out Gumshoe and Edgeworth have a really good working relationship. Don't misread that. What I mean is that they work so good together in a professional sense that they just kind of bonded together in that sense. Yeah, Gumshoe is quite a bit more helpful here. He still technically has to work for the prosecution, apparently, so he can't give away everything, but Gumshoe is... This is a turning point for Gumshoe, because he's really helpful in this case, more so than the previous two. And Edgeworth obviously can't be the prosecutor if he's the defendant, so it makes you wonder, well, who in the hell is going to prosecute the case? Let's put a pin note in that. I mean, if you played the game, you know it's revealed before the trial. So you find out someone witnessed the crime. Well, but the thing about it is, you find out about it in the middle of the investigation. And this character goes by the name Lotta Hart. Howdy, y'all! Oh god, Lotta Hart. Actually, I think she's a pretty fun character, honestly. Lotta is a lot like Wendy Oldbag. She's the kind of character you don't want to see all the time, but if you see her every so often, it's tolerable. It's fine. But it turns out Lotta Hart is a photographer. She's hunting something. We don't find out exactly the situation with that right now in the investigation chapter, but yeah, she kinda sort of accidentally or intentionally took a picture of the night when Edgeworth supposedly shot the guy. So she inadvertently becomes a witness for the prosecution. Not good. But Lotta Hart, she's a fun character to be sure. We're also reintroduced to Larry. Well, actually, there's a bit of a side plot going on here in Turnabout Goodbyes about the relationship between Phoenix, Edgeworth, and Larry. Because it turns out they were childhood friends. They all went to the same school. And it's kind of a minor thing in the grand scheme of things. But here in this case, they do kind of make a big deal about it. And I think you have to hear the story to actually be able to progress. So, you know. But yeah, Larry returns, so it kind of makes everything come full circle because he was in the first case. And Turnabout Goodbyes was originally the last case of Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney when it originally released on the Game Boy Advance in 2001. And Turnabout Goodbyes, as far as I'm concerned, I go from Turnabout Goodbyes straight to Justice for All every time I replay the series. And if I replay Rise from the Ashes, if I replay it, it's usually after Trials and Tribulations. You keep going through the case, and things get interesting. Basically, that's all there is for the first investigation. You're trying to convince Edgeworth to let Phoenix defend him. The first trial, though, oh boy, things get good. So the prosecutor turns out to be Edgeworth's mentor, Manfred von Karma. Oh man. Now that I know Ace Attorney isn't a traditional video game, so bosses and everything like that doesn't really apply here, but Von Karma is a final boss, let me tell you. Oh man. You don't get to see too much of the menace in the first trial segment. It's mostly focused on, yeah, Gumshoe shows up, he gives you the breakdown of the case, of course. Good old Gumshoe, doing his job, sometimes to the detriment of others, but you gotta do what you gotta do. But Lotta Hart shows up as a witness. And, her testimony was tampered by Von Karma. And the only way to expose the weakness in the testimony, apparently, was for Maya Fey to speak up, and basically, she was placed in contempt of court. Oh boy. Out of the frying pan and into the oven all over again after just 1.5 cases almost. Oh boy. So yeah, about halfway through the trial, she gets placed in contempt of court, and Phoenix has to go solo for a little while. But by that point, Lotta Hart's testimony is basically shredded. So Phoenix manages to expose the contradictions, as always, and get to live to tell another day. Lotta Hart's a fun character. Unfortunately, she does come off as a little bit more antagonistic than she normally is, so her first appearance is a little biased in that regard. However, she goes through a little bit of a redemption in the next investigation segment. The second investigation segment is kind of more of the same from the first one, but you do get introduced to a mysterious boat shopkeeper. And you don't even learn the dude's name. But he does have a pretty cool pet parrot. I'd say that much. But Lotta Hart, you find out that she was hunting for Gordy. Basically the Ace Attorney's universe answer to the Loch Ness Monster. You also find out about what Larry was up to. And you listen to Larry talk, and he starts talking about, when he was doing what he was doing, he was looking for a Steel Samurai balloon. And it turns out the Steel Samurai balloon was Gordy. But yeah, you start listening to Larry's testimony of sorts, and you might start to think, interesting. And, Lotta is basically done by this point. I'm pretty sure she doesn't show up again for the rest of the case after this investigation segment. So, the second investigation segment is more about finding out about the boat shopkeeper. You go into the second trial, and if you thought it was already good from the get-go, it gets better. So, the first witness is the boat shopkeeper. Yeah, somehow Von Karma tampered with him too. What witness hasn't Von Karma tampered with at this point? And of course, you can't really prove any contradictions outright, unfortunately. But a miracle happens. That's right, Larry shows up to save the day. That moment, when Larry steps in from the gallery to testify, that was the moment that I saw Larry as a decent character. I mean, before then, he was almost nothing. This is also where his character peaks. Is just chef's kiss. And, since Larry inadvertently steps into the testimony, there's no time for Von Karma to mess with him. Basically, it turns out Larry was there, and he heard a gunshot. Oh man, the twist. That's basically what happens with that trial. Larry, the butt strikes. So, but for the next investigation segment, you start off in the office, Larry is there, and you listen to the backstory between Edgeworth, Phoenix, and Larry about how all that happened. I'm not going to go into detail about it. I think it's a cool story and everything. I forgot to mention this, but for the second investigation segment, Gumshoe helps out a lot. He gives you 3 tools, a choice of 3 tools to use, and of the 3, it's pretty obvious which one is the most beneficial. The metal detector, that's going to come in handy later on. But the other 2, I think it was a fishing pole, and it was a dog named Missile. Missile is a dog. Dogs are cute. I like dogs. The third investigation segment, it's more so the leftovers. Like, the boat shopkeeper runs away towards the end of the second trial, so he's pretty much gonzo for the entire thing. So you're more so getting the backstory of that, getting the backstory of the DL6 case. Oh yeah, you get more information about that. And then it all tops off with Phoenix and Maya going to criminal affairs and running into Von Karma directly in person. Oh. But he has a taser, and he attacks Phoenix and steals some evidence. Yeah, you don't get 40 years of perfection without doing some forgery, I guess. And then we get to the final trial, and oh my god, the final trial. The game doesn't break it up into 2 smaller chapters, but it is long, and I think the game should have done it. The first part of the trial, here it's all about finding out who the boat shopkeeper is. And when you really, at this point, you really think about it, it can only really be one guy. It's the other guy that was involved in the DL6 case, right? Who else would have the motive to frame Edgeworth for murder? But the process you go through to find out who the boat shopkeeper is. So you have to call the parrot to testify, and you cross-examine the parrot. Yes, this is one of those infamous Ace Attorney moments, and it's good. But it is worth noting that Ace Attorney is very loosely based on real-life court proceedings. I suspect, I'm not a lawyer, but I suspect that if this was in real life, the parrot wouldn't be called to testify, obviously, but it's possible that they could have gotten like a tape recording of the parrot talking or something like that, and they could use that as evidence. I think that's a lot more realistic, but this is Ace Attorney. They can take some liberties. And honestly, this is one of those times where the liberties are used quite well. So, you find out the boat shopkeeper is Yanni Yogi. Every time I read that name, I can't not think about Yogi Bear. Hey, boo-boo, guess who's got a guilty verdict on her way? You know. But yeah, Yanni Yogi, he's found guilty of murdering Robert Hammond, the victim that everyone thought Edgeworth killed. And you think, oh great, Edgeworth is not guilty. Then Edgeworth, he confesses to being guilty of DL6 because when he was a kid, he thinks that he accidentally killed his father by throwing a pistol. Oh boy. Oh boy. And as you might suspect, Von Karma, he leaps on that right away. But it doesn't go on for as long as you think it would, because you go through the process and you find out, well, who has the motive to kill Gregory Edgeworth? Edgeworth's father, by the way. Remember that name because I'm sure to bring it up in a future retrospective episode. Again, one way or the other. But, yeah, long story short, since we're getting kind of long here, Von Karma is found to be guilty because he had the bullet in his shoulder, and you find this out by using the metal detector. Holy crap, that is just something else. Only in Ace Attorney, everybody. So, and that's it's a happy ending. Edgeworth is found not only innocent of the main crime, but also DL6. Obviously, Edgeworth feels a lot better. But after this, Edgeworth is just like, he's done with being a prosecutor, and that becomes a greater focus in Justice for All. Well, maybe not a great focus throughout the entirety of it, but definitely towards the end of it. And yeah, that's basically Turnabout Goodbyes. It's my favorite case in the first game. I think it's the best one. It's the longest one. It's got so many great moments to it. Just saying a lot, because Turnabout Samurai had a lot of great moments too. And honestly, this is when the series really starts to hit its stride, and really starts to show the strength of its writing, of its characters. You really start to see so much personality. Turnabout Sisters, I feel, in the first Turnabout, you get a taste. But it is, as soon as you clear those first two cases, and you get to Samurai and Goodbyes, it's just chef's kiss. And the thing about it is, this isn't, I mean, I consider the original game my favorite. But objectively speaking, it might not be the best. We have yet to hit that. You know, I'm happy to say that it's only going to get better. But before it gets better, we are going to take some detours, and for the time being, just go ahead and maybe get some snacks refilled or water refilled or whatever. We're going to take another intermission, and when we come back, I'm going to start talking about Phoenix Wright, Justice for All. And I've got some things to say. Phoenix Wright, Justice for All was released a mere year after the original game. Again, on the Game Boy Advance, but what are you gonna do? As a result, I'm gonna go over some general things. Mostly stuff that doesn't really pertain to the story, it's more so soundtrack and maybe aesthetics. In this case, though, the aesthetics are mostly the same. You're still dealing with the same system, so you don't expect any drastic changes. The soundtrack of Justice for All is quite different from the original game. I still personally prefer the first game's soundtrack. I find that Justice for All soundtrack is kind of more emotional, I guess you could say. Like, when I listen to Justice for All's music, it gets me thinking more, if that makes any sense. But the original game soundtrack is just so nice and easy to listen to while you're playing the game. And the corner theme is obviously iconic, so... And, yeah, aesthetics are mostly the same. Soundtrack is almost completely different. I don't think there's too much reused music from the first game at all, so... Gotta give credit where credit is due. But, on the gameplay side of things, this game only has 4 cases. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, Lazuli, you only went over the first 4 cases of the original Ace Attorney because that's how the game was originally released. So, Justice for All is at least an equal game, just looking at it from a surface level, right? Is though, nowadays, the original Phoenix Wright has 5 cases because they added the 5th case in the DS version. So, in retrospect, now the original and the 3rd game are the ones with the most cases at 5 apiece, and Justice for All still only has 4. It never got a bonus, and Trials and Tribulations never needed a bonus. So, but does that mean that Justice for All is inferior? It seems like a lot of people have that opinion, and I'm gonna go ahead and tell you that Justice for All, in my opinion, is my least favorite. But that doesn't mean it's a bad. It's definitely not a bad read. It's definitely still worth it. You know, but Justice for All, it does start off a little slow, and it kind of builds up. It's a bit of a rocky road from the start, and then in the middle, but when you get to the end of Justice for All, that's when things start picking up again, and then you start to think, maybe Justice for All is better than what the first game originally was. So why don't we go ahead and start talking about the first case, the Lost Turnabout. First of all, death by fire extinguisher. That is not the way I would want to go. Nah, but in all seriousness, nobody dies from the fire extinguisher, but Phoenix loses his memory. Oh no, amnesia! But to be fair, this is supposed to be a new game, so the first case is the tutorial case. Difference is, though, the Lost Turnabout is actually twice as long as the first Turnabout, so objectively, it's a deeper case, I guess. Trying to argue if it's better, well, I guess it is, but I still don't find it terribly interesting. The defendant this time around is Maggie Bird. And I'm mentioning her because she will show up again in later games, so... And, the murderer, kind of a forgettable guy, honestly. I almost forgot his name until just now. Richard Wellington. Sounds like a generic rich guy name. He's got some funny animations. I'll give him that. But, we have Gumshoe in our first case, so that's interesting. Actually, now that I think about it, this is the only time in the trilogy where Gumshoe shows up before the second case. And that's because Gumshoe may or may not have an attraction towards Maggie Bird. But anyway, the Lost Turnabout basically, Richard Wellington killed Maggie's boyfriend, quote-unquote, because he was a cop. And because Richard has bad eyesight, which is kind of a weird thing to do because he doesn't look like someone that would have bad eyesight. They still went in that direction. And the amnesia thing is... Again, for one time, it's an okay excuse, and Phoenix is still fairly new as a lawyer, so thankfully they don't really do this again. It's fine. Also, I didn't talk about him in the first Turnabout because it's so short, but now is a pretty good time to mention Winston Payne. Gotta love that pun, winced in pain, because wince is a very uncommonly used English word, so... I don't know if everybody will get that pun right away. I know I certainly didn't right away, but then I remembered that I actually did see the word used in the past, so, yeah. Winston Payne. And he's Winston Payne because he's always losing. Yeah, I got to knock out Winston Payne there. I mean, I had so many other things to talk about with the first Phoenix Wright Attorney. Can you blame me for forgetting about Winston Payne for one case? Wasn't gonna wait till his last But yeah, that's about all I have to say for Lost Turnabout. You know, it's twice as long as the first Turnabout, so it's objectively a better first case. But the first Turnabout did it first, so I don't know. They're both about equal, I'd say. Bah. Moving on to a much more interesting case, and it actually sets up a lot of stuff for the next game. Not so much within the scope of Justice for All, but for the next game and the rest of the trilogy, yes. And that's Reunion and Turnabout. This one's interesting. It also kind of hints at the theme of Justice for All a little bit. And it's, you know, the twist with the murderer is sort of kind of a hint, nudge towards what'll happen in the final case of Justice for All, but not really. It is kind of a weird coincidence how they do it, though. But anyway, first investigation chapter. Oh yeah, the structure for Justice for All cases, at least cases 2 and 3 of Justice for All, is an investigation chapter, 2 trials, because it's 1 trial but split into 2. 2 save points, I should say. That's how the chapters are separated. You can save the game at any time, but they still split up the stories in a way that makes sense most of the time, but sometimes you'll have a situation where you'll have a chapter that's like an hour long, and then you go to the next chapter in the case, and it might not even crack half an hour. Expect that to happen a lot when you're playing or watching someone else play Justice for All in particular. Yeah, it's kind of weird. So yeah, it's investigation, trial, investigation, trial. So you think, oh, there's more trials, more trial content in Justice for All. That automatically makes it better than the first game because trials are awesome. Yeah, but again, it's more like 1 trial split into 2. And the investigation chapters are longer in Justice for All than they are in the first game. A lot longer. Like, the first investigation chapter in Justice for All, I was kind of speedrunning it, and it still took me a little over an hour. So, and I knew what I was doing. I was using a step-by-step guide and all that stuff, and I was making sure I tried to skip the dialogue where I could, which is not very often, but there are moments in each case, each game, where you can omit dialogue and save you a little bit of time to get to the next chapter. So, but there's a new gameplay system introduced, and that's the Cyclops. Now, the Cyclops, it's interesting because you normally have to find evidence and whatnot anyway, so you do all that, and then you can use the evidence within the investigation chapters to find out more information from people that could potentially be witnesses, defendants, or the murderers. But something else that's changed too, it's kind of subtle, but you can actually present profiles now, which does make things a little bit deeper, not gonna lie. On a gameplay level, Justice for All is definitely a step up from the first game. It's when you get into like the writing and everything like that where you might start to raise an eyebrow. So the first investigation chapter, basically, you meet this guy named Dr. Turner Gray. He wants to hire a spirit medium to channel the spirit of a nurse that died in a car accident. What a premise, right? And apparently he wants to do this to get the nurse to confess that she made a mistake of malpractice. And they don't go too deep into detail about that. They focus more so on the nurse and her sister. Get to Kurain Village, or Kurain Village, I don't know how it's pronounced, we'll say Kurain. Kurain Village, we reunite with Maya and And that's why it's called Reunion and Turnabout, I guess. You reunite with Maya because she leaves at the end of Turnabout Goodbyes. But you're also introduced to Morgan Fay, who is Maya's aunt, as well as Pearl, who is just so adorable. And well, she does get the full chapter. So I'm gonna say, whenever Pearl is a character in a case, it's usually important. Pearl is so young. Oh man, I think she's like 7 years old in Justice for All. You usually can't tell it because, much like with Cody Hackins in the original Phoenix Wright, something about Ace Attorney and child characters, they just nail it. You can tell at times that Pearl is a young girl of 7 or so years old, but she carries herself so maturely, as much as I think a child of that age could possibly do. And it's always a joy to deal with Pearl in the investigation chapters. Obviously, she isn't really a presence in the trials. Gee, I wonder why. But in the investigation chapters where she's your partner instead of Maya, oh man, it is a joy. I'm not gonna lie. And you think, oh, child character, totally gonna be an annoyance, right? But no. And here's the thing. You know those Cyclocks I mentioned? You can't even do them unless Pearl charges something called a Magatama with her spiritual energy. And she's just as good at channeling the spirits as Maya does. Another thing too, if Pearl channels Mia, that usually means that things are gonna get real. I find, anyway. And if it's Maya channeling Mia going forward, it seems to usually be for comedic purposes. Thing about it is, though, after this case, Mia doesn't play as huge of a role. Her role in Phoenix's story will become less and less prevalent as the series goes on. But yeah, Pearl, I have nothing but good things to say about Pearl Fay. Yeah, anyway, yeah, Pearl is introduced, Morgan is introduced. Morgan is pretty important. There's also the return of Lotta Hart. Personally, I feel like it was maybe a little too soon, but I think there's another reason why they brought her back so soon, and that'll come into play in the trial. But Justice for All is the last time Lotta shows up in the trilogy. But the whole point of the first investigation is really mostly to get you used to the Cyclock system on a gameplay level. On a story level, you don't really accomplish much. Apparently, Maya successfully, quote-unquote, channeled the spirit of the dead nurse, and supposedly, the dead nurse killed the doctor, Dr. Turner Gray. Supposedly. So you have to defend her in the trial. Gumshoe is here, of course. I would say he's still pretty aloof. I don't think he's more aloof compared to his last appearance in Turnabout Goodbyes. He's not going to be as helpful because he's not helping out Edgeworth, but he might be more willing to help you nowadays because the new prosecutor that you're going to deal with is not very favorable for Gumshoe either. Compared to Von Karma, because hey, we got Von Karma again! Except it's not Manfred. It's Manfred's daughter, Franziska von Karma. You're gonna have to remember that name, because we're gonna be dealing with her exactly 2.5 times in the entire trilogy. Let's move on to the first trial. We're introduced to Franziska von Karma and her love of using a whip to get her point across in the trial. It is kind of an annoying gimmick, and it is a little overused. And man, by the time you get to Lotta Hart's testimony, because, fun fact, Lotta and Phoenix were right there, like right behind a door when the murder went down, so... Oh man, talk about a recipe for disaster, right? More like a recipe for turnabout. But anyway, Lotta Hart's testimony, you know. This time around, when you deal with Lotta... Oh, by the way, before Lotta, you deal with Gumshoe. Of course. Do I have to say it at this point? But like I said, Gumshoe isn't really a big deal in this case. But when you deal with Lotta this time around, you do feel like that she is on your side for the most part, and she isn't, you know, just trying to get attention or like she was the last time. So it's by the time you get to Reunion and Turnabout where I think Lotta is fully redeemed, as it were. But no, I think this is Lotta's best appearance in the trilogy for sure. Still maybe a little annoying for some people, especially if you hate people that talk in the Southern accent. Fun fact, I was actually born in the South of the United States, but I don't really have that much of a strong Southern accent, which I'm very thankful for. And I think she has a pretty nice design, too. She's not overly feminine. And, you know, it's really important to spotlight not every person that identifies as a woman is going to look super feminine, you know what I mean? But the first trial is mostly centered around introducing Franziska and dealing with Lotta once again. When we come back to the investigation, things get a good bit more interesting. We start digging into someone named Eenie Miney. I think it's Eenie Miney, because, you know, like Eenie Meenie Miny Mo. Yeah, this woman that just happens to be at the Korean village, when the whole murder channeling was going down. But, you know, she happened to be there, and she's suspicious because of this. But until the final trial, at best, you only have your suspicions. Even when you find out a potential motive, you really only have your suspicions to go by. And that doesn't hold up in a court of law in the Ace Attorney universe, and it doesn't hold up in a court of law in real life either. Although, funny enough, it probably has a stronger case in real life than it does in the Ace Attorney universe. But anyway, yeah, in the investigation, you learn more about Eenie Miney. You learn a little bit more about Morgan as well. But that's about it, really. I mean, you also go to a clinic where Eenie Miney supposedly had work done after her accident because, as I mentioned earlier, the nurse that worked for Turner Gray got involved in the accident, and her sister was there, but her sister survived, supposedly. So that's really what the focus of the second investigation is learning more about Eenie Miney and the history behind her. And Lotta actually helps with that, so that's cool. You also learn a little bit more about Morgan, because Morgan decides to testify at the start of the second trial of Reunion and Turnabout. And this is where you start to learn more about, or you start to get a hint more for Morgan's intentions. Because, shock and surprise, it turns out Eenie Miney is the one that murdered Dr. Turner Gray. And Morgan helped out with this. And then, you know, the way they find out about the channeling being a fake, being a hoax, was very interesting. And then there's one point where Franziska von Karma brings up taking a picture at the detention center of Phoenix talking to Mia in Maya's body, and that just gets brushed aside so quickly. I thought that was weird in retrospect. No, you know. But yeah, you find out that Morgan, you know, was in cahoots with Eenie Miney to murder Dr. Turner Gray and get Maya suspected of murder, so that way Pearl would take over for Maya, which is really interesting direction. Definitely, that's one reason why I think this is a damn good case. Another thing, though, is the twist behind Eenie Miney, because it turns out Eenie Miney is Mimi Miney. Yeah, man, that twist is just chef's kiss. To this point, probably the strongest twist in the series, because you would never think of it until literally minutes before it gets revealed in the story. I mean, obviously, every time I replay it, I know about the twist, but I still acknowledge it as a brilliant twist. And this is just the second case of Justice for All. Like I said, let's give credit where credit is due. But yeah, at the end of Reunion and Turnabout, Maya kind of reunites with Mia thanks to Pearl joining the fray, and now we have two spirit mediums, so that's cool. But yeah, Reunion and Turnabout, very good case. Another one that's definitely underrated. I don't see people arguing that it's filler, because it's definitely not, unlike what happened with Turnabout Samurai. So yeah, I still feel like people downplay this case a little bit too much in discussions, but it's still a good case, and it is an important case. You know, I feel like if you ever replay Justice for All, you really are only obligated to replay the second and fourth case, because those are the most important ones in Justice for All. The first one is a tutorial case, it's harmless, And then we get to Case 3. And sadly, it's just as long as Reunion and Turnabout, so that's going to have to get its own little chunk of discussion. But, hey, it is what it is. So, we're going to take another brief intermission, and then when I come back, we're going to talk about clowns. In West Clownadelphia, born and raised, oh boy. I knew it was going to come to this eventually, but we need to talk about Turnabout Big Top, the third case of Justice for All. A lot of people consider this the worst case in the trilogy. Some argue the worst case in the entire series. Well, I can see where they're coming from, more so than usual. This is my least, speaking personally, this is my least favorite case in the trilogy as well. The first time around, though, when I first played it, I'm pretty sure I enjoyed it a lot more because I do like a lot of the character designs here. And I do like the concept of defending a circus performer. And, you know, you're dealing with a circus. And I remember vaguely hearing about this before I got into the series. And even back then, I thought it was a really interesting concept. But here's the thing. Sometimes a concept can sound really good, but when the concept is put into execution, that is where it will prove if the concept really does stand. And thankfully, in history, it works out well. But it doesn't always work out well. Let's give credit where credit is due. Again, I think some of the character designs are legitimately fun and creative. I do think the concept is also fun and creative. But again, the execution, not so much. And the writing, not so much. I will also say that the second half of this case is several magnitudes better than the first half. And honestly, it's because of the second half that I consider this case not the worst. Because the second half really does kind of save it. The first investigation, it turns out Max Galactica, the local magician of the circus, is the one accused of murder. Murdering the ringmaster, of all people. And at first, even before you find out the mechanics behind it, you find out the murder method, and you're like, wow, that's definitely out of the ordinary. But you're also introduced to basically all but one major character in the first investigation. And most of them are pretty dang unlikable. I don't really consider Mo all too unlikable. I actually kind of dig his shtick a little bit, I'm gonna be honest, but even his stuff gets old by the time you get to his moment in the trial. And that's another thing too. Almost all of the circus members, they testify in the court still in circus attire. And I'm like, even for Ace Attorney, that's just cringe. You're not gonna see, in real life, you are not gonna see someone testify in court while they're still dressed up like a clown. At least the ventriloquist guy is mostly properly attired, but it's just so dumb how they do that. They should have made separate designs for the trial segments. I think it could have had more potential, actually. They could have shown off what circus performers look like outside of the circus, and there could have been potential for more fun visual gags, I think. But no. And then Franziska von Karma is once again the prosecutor. And I'll say this much again to give credit where credit is due. She's a little more tolerable this time compared to Reunion and Turnabout. A little bit. Especially when you find out about a certain twist during the second half. This first half, it drags. The investigation segment drags because you're doing a lot of back and forth. You gotta talk to people. You gotta find the ventriloquist guy's dummy, for some reason. And you also talk to Max Galactica for a little bit too long, I feel, to get everything. You still have to go back to talk to him throughout the entire thing, so. And then the first trial, it's better than the investigation, obviously, but it's still a mess. When you have to cross-examine Mo, there's, I think, 1 or 2 times where if you do the wrong thing, you'll get punished for it. I can't remember if it was an instant game over or if you just lost some points or whatever. But it's still annoying how they do that, and I could go into more detail about the stuff that goes on in the first half, but I think I've said all I need to say. So let's just move on to the second half, which is better. You get introduced to a character named Acro, Ken Dingling, and then his brother Bat, Acrobat. That's a fun pun, because they're acrobatic brothers. When you find out about the backstory, you start to figure out, oh, well, that's definitely unfortunate. And then you start to think, wait a minute. Why was the ringmaster murdered again? And how was he murdered again? And, oh, man. So we kind of go back to an eeny-miny type of twist almost, but it's in a completely different direction. So when you go into the next trial, it's all about Acro. It's literally like an hour straight of you against Acro because he is one of the most cool-headed witnesses in the series. I think maybe there's only 1 or 2 others that come even close. One of them in the same game, actually, in the next case. No, enough. But Acro is such a tragic character. So again, I'm gonna try and cut some things short because this is Turnabout Big Top. You find out that Acro wanted to murder Regina because he was so mad at Regina playing a prank on Bat. It wasn't her intention to get him messed up. He didn't get murdered. He got put into a coma because the lion bit into him. Like, wow. It wasn't her intention to do that, but Acro is still mad at the justification she has where, oh, if somebody dies, they become a star in the sky, which there's nothing wrong with that. That's a pretty innocent way of looking at people dying. I don't have a problem with that. But apparently the way the writing indicates, Acro does. Because, well, technically Bat isn't dead, so how can he be a star in the sky if he's not dead, right? And so, I guess the rage is justified, but him actually trying to go through with the murder, though, I don't know about that, fam. But because of his rage, he winds up accidentally killing the ringmaster, who was sort of a father figure to him. So, I mean, Acro's a murderer, but he murdered someone he cared about, and he didn't try to do it. Oh, and the murder method? I can't think of a crazier murder method in the series off the top of my head, because right now I'm actually replaying the games. I'm doing this retrospective while I'm replaying the games. So anything after the 3rd game is going to be, you know, hit and miss with my memory, because there's a lot to remember with some of these stories. But this is still probably the craziest murder method that I can think of off the top of my head. There are certainly contenders, but basically Acro had Max's bust, and then through a convoluted, like a crane system, since he's in a wheelchair, he holds the rope that holds the bust on top of the box below, and when he hears the person bend over to get the box, that's when he's supposed to let the bust go. Holy crap. I'm trying not to curse too much, but holy crap. That's my thoughts on Turnabout Big Top. I mean, I've given it its dues. Alright, but this is definitely 99% a filler case. There is a little scene at the end of this case that basically spells out that Edgeworth played a large role in helping out, helping Phoenix find the truth. Because that's what Edgeworth is all about now. He's all about finding the truth, not just getting his guilty verdicts. Edgeworth suggests Franziska to start a search, which prompts Aggro to put the bust, in his wheelchair, hidden under a blanket. Which is brilliant. But because of that, Aggro wound up being stuck in the courtroom with the murder weapon. So that's Edgeworth played quite a game of logic chess there, huh? Giving credit where credit is due, Turnabout Big Top is probably not the worst case in the series, but it's a dip. It's definitely a dip. But sometimes you have to hit rock bottom, or close to it, before you can reach the top. Because the next case is Farewell My Turnabout. Well, here we are. Farewell My Turnabout is, so far in this retrospective, the best case. And there's a lot of arguments to be made here, and there's a lot I have to say, so for the sake of pacing, I'm going to forego some things. I mentioned earlier that there's a lot of good, but there might be a few niggles here. I think I'm going to go ahead and get those few niggles out of the way first. By talking about the gigantic amount, comparatively speaking, of returning characters from previous cases. And honestly, it's mostly a mixed bag. More like a mixed old bag, am I right? We start off by reuniting with Will Powers from Turnabout Samurai, which is pretty nice. Definitely not a murder suspect this time, so we get to see a little bit more of his personality shine through. They make him out to be someone who's into gossip, which kind of makes sense for an actor, actually. I do find it weird that they decided to bring him in during one of the last trial chapters for a cross-examination that ultimately didn't amount to much. But I guess for the sake of the plot, it makes sense, so... But there are two other returning characters that are perhaps not as appealing. One of them is a character that just came back in Reunion and Turnabout, and they decided to bring back Lotta Hart again. They totally could have done a new character or brought back another character like, I don't know, Larry, which, funnily enough, they do that in the anime, the Ace Attorney anime. I think I might talk more about that maybe in the next episode. No, we're dealing with the main narrative in the games. They bring back Lotta again. Thankfully, she's not a witness this time around. She's in the investigation chapters a little bit, because she plays a minor role and actually has a conflict with the other returning character, that being Wendy Oldbag. I kind of gave it away, but... And she's a little bit more annoying this time compared to Turnabout Samurai, but it's mostly because she's around for a little bit longer. But I don't think she goes full bore annoying here. She's a little bit more annoying than Turnabout Samurai, and ultimately she doesn't really add much to the case, but her returning doesn't bother me as much as Lotta for some reason. And they have a gimmick this time where she's wearing an astronaut suit or something like that, and she'll playfully shoot the laser at people she doesn't like. It's funny, like the first couple of times, but when it keeps happening, and even happens during the courtroom proceedings, it's a little eh. But, you know, Wendy, Lotta, Will Powers all coming back from previous cases. Like I said, Lotta sticks out like a sore thumb. Couldn't they have brought back Penny Nichols instead? I know I didn't talk about her in Turnabout Samurai. She was ultimately a pretty minor character in the grand scheme of things, but hey, they could have brought her back, and then they would have had, like, the whole Turnabout Samurai reunion of sorts. But, nah, brought back Will Powers and Wendy Oldbag. And Will Powers, you know, there's potential there to give him more of a spotlight as a non-defendant, but honestly, they are those. That's the few niggles I have, is Lotta and Wendy, and, you know, they aren't too deeply entrenched in this massive case. Now that I've got the minor gripes out of the way, let's get into the goods. So, there's a kidnapping in this case. Maya gets kidnapped by an assassin by the name of Shelley the Killer. And it's so good the way they portray the killer. He's an assassin, but he has a code of ethics. It's interesting. Someone who is able to kill people with no remorse because it's a profession, yet he still has a code and to follow. It's interesting how they do that, you know? And the way they handle him showing up in court is brilliant, especially the actual design of the walkie-talkie. If you look at the walkie-talkie, it has a striking resemblance to how Shelley the Killer actually looks. Sadly, though, he's more of a background element until the end of the case, but he's a strong background element, we'll say that much. And I'm glad this isn't the last time he appears in the series, but it will be a very long time before we see said reappearance. But the other new characters, I really like Adrian Andrews and the arc that they put her through in this case. Basically, she has like a codependency thing. So, like, she needs to... it's kind of... I don't want to say it's vague, but it's not really super descriptive in the story of the case. But it's like, she depends on other people. So she's dependent on someone who killed themselves in the past. And in order for her to live, I guess, she finds other people to be dependent on. It's a habit she's definitely wants to get rid of and everything, but it's hard. Maybe in a way, because she's actually the manager of this guy named Matt Ungard. And Matt Ungard is the suspect, the defendant. And Phoenix is forced to defend him by the killer. And the killer kidnapped Maya to do it. So right off the bat, there's some suspicious stuff going on here. And Phoenix doesn't seem to question it all that much at first, which is a little weird maybe, but it's consistent with his character of always believing in his clients. And hey, up until now, it's worked out wonderfully for him, even if every so often you'll get quite a character as a client, if you know what I'm saying. And shout out to Max Galactica, who was a bit of a diva in Turnabout Big Top, but yeah, it's already suspicious. But you don't really get into Matt Ungard deeply until the second half of the case. Understandable. Ultimately, the first half of Farewell My Turnabout is mostly setting up the killer. You get introduced to Ungard and Andrews, and there's some other nice details, like, you know, Pearl is back. You gotta have somebody to make up for Maya being kidnapped, so Pearl is back as a partner, and yeah, she brings a surprisingly mature air to everything, which, for this case in particular, it's definitely icing on the cake, I'll give you that. Gumshoe is helpful, a lot like he was in Turnabout Goodbyes, but for different reasons, and he actually helps out in a similar way to Turnabout Goodbye. So I guess we can always count on Gumshoe to really come through by the end of a particular game's grander story arc. I guess that's the consistent thing about Gumshoe. Yeah, and he definitely does come through, even if he needs a little bit help from a certain other individual. And speaking of which, you remember how I said Franziska von Karma would be prosecuting for 2.5 cases? You're probably thinking, oh, she's going to be the prosecutor here, right? Because she was the prosecutor the other 2 times. Yeah, no, the killer, the killer is like, no, we're just going to shoot her in the shoulder so she won't prosecute. But then the goodness happens. The greatness happens. Edgeworth comes back to take her place. But it's the new Edgeworth that isn't out for guilty verdicts. He's out for the truth. And he gets pretty ruthless about it. So it's here in Farewell My Turnabout where we see the fruits of Edgeworth's mostly background struggles. There's a little bit of it in Rise from the Ashes, but that was made after Justice for All, so yeah, it's hard to compare it directly. But yeah, we see the fruits of Edgeworth's development off-screen come to fruition here in Farewell My Turnabout. And for the most part, it's for the better. Except for that one time he kind of threatens Andrews by revealing her secret about the codependency thing and try to get her to talk more about the relationship with On Guard and all that stuff. And that wasn't cool, but everything else Edgeworth does is pretty dang cool in this case, I gotta say. Sometimes there are necessary evils, and that's true in real life too. You don't want to eat, you don't want to have to sleep 8 hours a night, but you have to, because that's what your body needs. It's a necessary evil. Maybe not the best example, but yeah, no. But yeah, that's basically the first half. It establishes the main characters of this case, and, well, we get a little... There's like a part where Phoenix also kind of has a heel turn a little bit, where he tries to cast suspicion on Adrian Andrews, and to be fair, she does do some stuff that could legitimately cast suspicion on her. She does desecrate the crime scene in a lot of ways, but her motivations make sense. But, again, grounds for suspicion that she probably murdered Juan Corrida. Yeah, it's almost like Farewell My Turnabout is kind of a follow-up to Turnabout Samurai in a way. Which, again, going back to my argument earlier back then, why do people consider Turnabout Samurai a filler case? There's quite a few details from there that are quite important. Well, maybe not important, but are noted here in Farewell My Turnabout. Turnabout Samurai is not a filler case. No matter how hard you try to argue, it's not a filler case. Turnabout Big Top, though, yeah, that's a filler case, because that case doesn't really get brought up again, ever, in the rest of the series. Turnabout Samurai, though, yeah, it gets brought up. It gets brought up here, and it gets brought up again in one of the side games. Like, you think I'm kidding, but no, it's an important case, okay? Don't want to ramble on about that, but back to Farewell My Turnabout. So, the first half, towards the end, suddenly Andrews is suspected of possibly murdering Juan Corrida, but there is still suspicion towards Matt on guard, naturally. So during the second half, you're dealing with getting more information from Andrews and also getting more information from Matt on guard. So, oh boy. During the middle of the second investigation, you find out that there was a teddy bear in Juan Corrida's room. Innocent looking teddy bear, but it has a camera for an eye. Oh boy. Then you track the source of the camera. Oh boy. Then you find out it was Matt on guard that bought the teddy bear and the camera. So you have all that stuff. You bring it to Matt on guard, and maybe with the help of the Cyclops, they don't hurt. They have that Magatama around to break those Cyclops. It definitely doesn't hurt. They're on side. It's whatever, but you break the Cyclops, you got all this evidence, you present it to Matt on guard, and eventually he's like, well, there's probably no point in hiding it anymore. He just pulls his hair back and reveals the scars on his eye. Maybe he got it from his cat or something. He does have a cat. It's actually a minor plot point for a little bit. But, yeah, you have to go feed his cat. But then when you go there, there's a familiar-looking butler who named John Doe. Weird thing about that. But, yeah, it turns out Matt Ungard hired the killer to kill Juan Carita. Shock and surprise, I know. I mean, it kind of is, honestly. Like, the first time, I don't remember how I reacted the first time exactly, but I'm sure I was shocked because it wasn't spoiled to me, and I also played it after. Like I said, I played the trilogy in reverse order the first time, so yeah. That was not spoiled, even playing the games in reverse. So, oh boy. You know how I said Eeny Meeny was kind of a hint towards the type of twist that this game would have? Yeah! Matt Ungard is where it all culminates, you could say. Oh boy. Thing about it is, you get that twist, and you still have the whole second trial. There's like 2 or 3 hours of the case left after that twist. You no longer, as a player, you no longer have the motivation to defend Matt Ungard. Because you know he's a killer. I mean, he didn't actually kill Juan Carita, but he hired an assassin to do it. And the assassin is apparently impossible to get arrested, I guess. So the next best thing is to arrest the guy, get the guy who hired the assassin convicted, which makes sense. I don't know if that's how it would go in real life. Probably. I think it's still a crime to hire an assassin. I don't know if it's in the same level as actually murdering someone yourself, but a crime is still a crime. So, oh boy, you head into the final trial, and by this point, Edgeworth knows about the Maya kidnapping situation, so even he's trying to delay things as much as possible so that Gumshoe can track down the killer and try to rescue Maya himself, so Phoenix can let off and let Matt get his guilty verdict. And, you know, Maya will be safe. That's the #1 thing. To try and get Matt found guilty, since he's a pretty bad guy. And get Andrew. He has to juggle like 3 different things. Maybe 4, depending on how you look at it. He's got to worry about Maya. He has to worry about getting Ungard, like, not found not guilty, but can't find him guilty until Maya gets rescued. And then the Andrews thing, like, at points towards the end, you start to feel like, man, I should be defending Adrian Andrews, not Matt Ungard. And yeah, it's pretty interesting to think in an alternate universe where Andrews is Phoenix's client. And I think it would work so well. But then the shoe is on the other foot, or in this case, the steel or nickel samurai outfit is on the other shoe, or whatever you want to call it. By the way, that's the name of Matt Ungard's cat, Shoe. Weird coincidence, huh? Also, kind of a random thought, but I really like Adrian Andrews' fashion sense. I know it's really simple, but sometimes simple is best. Like, I gotta give her points for the actual articles of clothing, but like the color schemes, I don't know, light blue with dark blue. I don't know about that, Chief. So I wanted to get that out of the way because now all I have left to talk about is the finale. Like, there's stuff that happens before the Killer cross-examination that's obviously there to pad things out for Gumshoe to find Maya. Stuff like cross-examining Will Powers, like I mentioned earlier, and cross-examining Adrian Andrews again to find out about some sort of suicide note that's inside of a teddy bear figurine. Which doesn't really add a lot, but I guess it does give a bit more credits to Matt's motive for murder, I guess. So there's that. But both of those are there to give Gumshoe more time to find Maya. But Gumshoe gets himself in a car accident, only for Franziska von Karma to come through in the end with the evidence in Gumshoe's coat. So Franziska, at the last minute, redeems herself and becomes a pretty good character. And she actually only really gets better. Keep that in mind. I said 2.5 cases, but she still only counts for 2. She almost got into this one, but the killer robbed her of that. And then Edgeworth swooped in for the rescue, and honestly, I don't think there's a single person that would complain about that, because Edgeworth is obviously the best. The best. So, honestly, I do think Edgeworth is the best prosecutor in the series, but as far as the prosecutor you look forward to facing against the most, Edgeworth becomes a friend after a couple cases. So, you're not dealing with him as an enemy. He's actually an ally that's working from the opposite side of you. And he's there to keep bouncing Phoenix's arguments back and forth, kind of like ping pong or something like that, to eventually get to the truth. Think of it like a puzzle game like Pong or something like that, where Phoenix and Edgeworth are two paddles, and they're constantly bouncing balls back and forth until they eventually deteriorate the structure in the middle that will eventually pave way for the truth. That is how things are supposed to look going forward with Edgeworth's new mentality as far as the truth being important. That's my interpretation anyway. But yes, we get to the end, the evidence is brought in, and it's interesting that if you don't present the evidence in the right way, you actually get a bad ending. And there's a typo. Instead of the miracle never happened, it's the miracle never happened. It's unfortunate that that typo slipped in at the most inopportune moment, but it is what it is, and people quote it humorously. I mean, thankfully it was the bad ending, which most people won't get, so yeah, you know. Well, intentionally, anyway. Oh boy. But whenever I replay, I always just get the good ending, which is a pretty interesting way to do it. So instead of presenting evidence to the judge, like you've been doing, you present evidence to the killer himself. You present a tape. Because you figure out that Matt Ungard was filming the killer to use as blackmail. So you tell the killer about this, and it's basically over from there, folk. It's basically over. You know, whether you decide to go for a guilty or not guilty verdict for Matt Ungard, he wants a guilty verdict because he would rather rot in prison than worry about an assassin coming to kill him in outside of prison. So, you know, it's definitely a tough choice. I don't know what choice I would make in that situation, but then again, I'm not an asshole, and I don't choose to live like one. So I probably would never have to worry about that sort of thing. Justice for All definitely ends on a strong statement. Can I say that? And while the final case is arguably one of the best cases in the series, it's Turnabout Big Top. Oh man, to go from that to this, and you know, then you have Reunion and Turnabout, which is it's a good case too, but that's one other case, and then the first case is the first case. You can't really use that as an argument. So yeah, it's sad to say Justice for All is competent, and that last case really does even things out. But it's just not as strong as the first game, especially, well, let me rephrase another way. I think it might be a little bit better overall, thanks to that final case. Overall, a little bit better than the original Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, but the final version of Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney we have nowadays is objectively better because it has Rise from the Ashes to pick up the slack a little bit. So yeah, I'll be sure to talk more about that, Rise from the Ashes, next time. But this is going to end the first episode of my Ace Attorney. At this point, it's just the Trilogy retrospective, but I'm sure I'll expand it eventually, depending on how things go. I covered first two games pretty sufficiently, and this took a pretty good amount of time. So next time, I'm going to be talking about Trials and Tribulations. And if I need to, I'll probably fill in some of the time to make this more in line with this one by talking about stuff like Rise from the Ashes. Actually, I'm going to talk about Rise from the Ashes before Trials and Tribulations to kind of make it more in line with this episode. I think I might also talk about the anime a little bit, because the anime is kind of an interesting thing. I alluded to it a little bit in previously, actually earlier, when I was talking about what they did with Lotta. So, you know. That seems like something I might discuss, because I have seen the anime. So, be sure to... I might talk about that next time. I can't promise it, because it's technically not a video game, but I still might talk about it anyway. If you guys enjoyed this retrospective, you feel free to like. Do try to make post a comment if you can, unless you're like watching on TV, which it's understandable. You can't post comments on when you're watching on TV. I should know because I usually make my videos in mind for the TV viewing format. So if you can't view a comment, understand. You can still leave a like though. No excuse for that. You can still leave likes on TV apps. So you do you, fam, and I hope you enjoyed this. Whether you're a newcomer, you're probably not, but if you are, or if you are someone that played the games and you're wanting to hear other people's thoughts and opinions, because this is the kind of thing that I think is better to do a retrospective for, rather than something like a Let's Play, because, oh lord. If I tried to do a Let's Play of just, like, the Trilogy, that would be, like, almost 60 hours. But if I just do these retrospectives, I think it's a more condensed format for people to enjoy. You want my thoughts? Well, there you go. This is how you get them. And if you want to see me play through the games, just look up the speed plays on the same channel. Very easy to do. They're all in organized playlists for your convenience. So, this has been Lazuli. This has been part 1 of the Ace Attorney retrospective. See you guys next time for Rise from the Ashes, Trials and Tribulations, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit of anime.